Ladies and gentlemen, in this very special episode, we're going to be speaking with some of the most creative minds behind Diablo lore. We're also going to be exploring one of the most fascinating relics that Blizzard has ever released, the Book of Tyrael. Welcome to BlizzPro's TwizCast. Welcome, everyone, to a very special episode of TwizCast. This episode is going to be quite a bit different than the ones that you are used to hearing. A lot of the Blizzard interviews that take place on the show are geared towards game development and what we can expect from some of our favorite titles, but we are switching up gears this time around, and we are going to discuss one of the most fascinating relics that Blizzard has ever released. First off, please allow me to make a few introductions just to kick this off. Co-hosting this episode with me is BlizzPro's lead Diablo 3 editor and expert, Nineball. Welcome to the show, sir.
Guten Tag.
I didn't know you were German today, so...
Just today.
Also with me on the line, would you please help me welcome to the show for the very first time as well, Blizzard Entertainment's publishing lead, Mr. Micky Neilson. Welcome to TwizCast, sir.
Hey, everybody. Thank you very much.
It's good to have you here. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome to the show Associate Story Developer and the author of the Book of Tyrael, Mr. Matt Burns. It's an honor and privilege to have you on the show as well, sir.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks so much for having us on.
Oh, our privilege. Trust me on that. So, gentlemen, your time is exceptionally valuable, and we really want to dig into this as much as we can. So let's start covering some ground, if you don't mind. I'd like to start with Micky real quick. I visited your website, which is MickyNeilson.com. And the About section that talks about your past is unbelievably impressive. You're the publishing lead at Blizzard Entertainment, and you've been there for about 2 decades now. The Book of Tyrael obviously isn't your first foray into the realm of Diablo. What other works have you done to explore the world of Sanctuary?
Oh, let's see. The most recent, I believe, was the Hatred and Discipline short story. So that was the story about the demon hunter, Vala.
Mm-hmm.
And that was released on the website around the launch of Diablo 3. And then that was also published as part of an anthology of short stories that's available now through Amazon. It is called Heroes Rise, Darkness Falls. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the last thing I did for Diablo as far as writing goes. And then I was a voice director for a while.
Wow.
And so the first thing that I did as a voice director was back, I think it was on D2. It was either D2 or D2X, and that was kind of my first foray into voice directing. So I did a little bit of that, and I did, at different times, I did a little bit of writing for the game, journals and things like that. But that's mainly it.
Wow.
I think. I might be forgetting something.
Oh, kind of a jack of all trades. That's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, and overseeing the books. So the Order was the first thing that I really kind of oversaw as a novel for Diablo.
Okay, very cool.
And yeah, by overseeing, that's you kind of make sure that everything fits well and that the writer doesn't go too far off track in terms of how you want to keep the lore.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for our process, the way we develop novels and really all our fiction is we have story developers. So like Matt, for instance, is a story developer. And what we'll do is we'll bring in an author and we'll kind of, we'll have an outline in mind for them usually. And we'll hand off the outline to them and they'll go through and they'll kind of add to it and bring their own voice and their own ideas to the project, and then they'll go through and they'll do their first draft, and the story developer will then take a look at that, and they'll make sure all kinds of things. They'll make sure that it's telling the story that we want to tell. They'll make sure that it's tying in the way that we want the story to tie into game content. And they'll just look at things like characterization and flow and pacing and all the kinds of things that a really, really good storyteller is going to look for and that people are going to look for in a good story. And so that was kind of my role for the order and also for the upcoming book, Storm of Light, also by Nate Kenyon, who did the order. So, when you're doing that, and then we have the lore folks, the historians, who will go through, and they're the ones who really, really get into the details and fact check everything.
Oh, wow.
That's Evelyn and her team, right?
Yep, exactly. Evelyn Fredrickson.
And is that for that overseeing the novels and such? Is in the Book of Tyrael, you're credited with additional writings? Is that kind of how you approach the Book of Tyrael in your own part? Was there little parts that you wrote, or were you also in charge of going through and like keeping all the sections together and making it coherent, or was that something more that Matt was involved with?
Yeah, for Book of Tyrael, I was pretty much just at the top level, just kind of making sure that everything was running smoothly. For Book of Cain, I did some actual writing. Me, Flint Dilley, Matt Burns, we all kind of jumped in on Book of Cain at various parts. Although it was mainly Flint, and for Book of Tyrael, it was really Matt's show as far as the writing goes. I mean, he was just a one-man wrecking ball on this thing. He went through and yeah, it's he's awesome. So he did a great job, and the credit absolutely goes to Matt for the writing on this book.
Thanks. And just to add to that, like in a lot of ways, Mickey was kind of like my editor on Book of Tyrael. That's,
Sure.
It's like a good way to look at it too. Like I would do writing, and then we would meet up, and he would read over it, and we'd talk about it, and we'd make changes and stuff like that. So
Awesome. That is
Yeah,
awesome.
that was really noticeable because it had like a much more coherent vibe going, from cover to cover instead of just kind of like being a collection of notes that the Book of Cain was.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Very cool.
And speaking of the, like you said, the Book of Cain being a loose collection of stories about the creation of the universe and a timeline of Sanctuary, along with the detailed notes on the major players involved in the backstory. But the Book of Tyrael is written with a much more concise goal in mind. Was this something that you just set out to do, or was this change in narrative spurred by something that you learned from putting together the Book of Cain?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. And I mean, it's something else I should mention too is Chris Metzen and his involvement in all of this, especially for Book of Cain, because that was really, a source book and so much about the origins and everything else. And a lot of that was really just inside Chris's head. And so, there were lots of meetings and everything else and figuring out the best way to convey all of that information.
Sure.
And so it was a little bit looser, and it was exploratory and trying to figure out, okay, what are these different origins and what are the different stories we're going to tell? Even just figuring out the structure of the book and, what should come first? Should we talk about the high heavens first, or the hells and the different demons and everything else, and figuring out what made the most sense? And then so it was a different process for Book of Tyrael, where we sat down and we had a much clearer idea of what the direction was going to be pretty much from the outset for Book of Tyrael.
Yeah.
Matt, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I think that kind of worked in our favor too, because Deckard Cain as a character, I can see him writing and it being a little more scattered, and because he's gathering information from all these different places and he's just kind of laying it out there.
Sure.
Whereas Tyrael, he's a little more, orderly. Maybe because of his angelic background, like I could see him being much more concise and clear if he would lay out a book. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
So there's some cool character differences there as well between the two books.
Awesome.
Law
Yeah,
and order.
very noticeable.
Yeah. Justice.
Yes.
Or used to be, but.
Oh, absolutely fascinating, guys. Well, this obviously wouldn't be a lore type book interview without some lore questions, and I'm certain that you guys will have some fun answering these. In the Book of Tyrael, Leia's journal references in-game dates along with months such as Ratham and Ostara. These months, along with others, have been referenced in other works as well. Are these names that are just thrown together for convenience, or have you made an actual calendar for Sanctuary?
We haven't made a calendar that we've published publicly, but as Mickey mentioned the historians earlier, so they kind of keep track of all these months and dates, and they kind of have their calendar for the world that we can kind of draw on and use. So yeah, I guess to answer the question, we do have a calendar for Sanctuary. It's just we haven't really released that whole thing yet,
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what, day one when it launches, I'm buying it. So don't be scared of that. So
that would be an interesting touch to add to like the yearly Diablo calendars that you guys release.
Yeah, that would be cool.
All right, moving on to the next question. In the Book of Tyrael has some sections where Tyrael was lamenting the fact that he wasn't able to participate in the light song, the birthing of new angels. During this event, are only new angels formed, or is this the point when dead ones resurrect, like when Tyrael was able to reform, 20 years after the destruction of Mount Arreat? Do these angels just reform themselves at any particular point in time, or are they only rebirthed during the light song as well?
My understanding, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is that the situation with Tyrael was a very unique situation, where typically if an angel is destroyed, that's it, they're gone, and then new angels are formed. So with Tyrael, it's really, really kind of interesting that he was able to reform, and it's kind of a momentous thing that you don't see, and that doesn't happen, I think, very often at all in the high heavens, if ever. I don't think we've talked about it happening with anybody else, and I think that makes Tyrael even more special, which I think is really cool. And that whole concept is touched on a little bit more in Storm of Light as well.
Okay.
So
really looking
something,
forward to it.
yeah, something definitely to keep an eye out for there.
So, all right. So I guess that's kind of like one of the things that further separates the demons and the demons and the angels, because we obviously have seen through the short story Wrath that you guys did prior to the launch of Diablo 3 that the primevals just will eventually come back over time, but that obviously doesn't go for the Anguirus Council as well.
Yeah, and the primevals, they're destroyed on Sanctuary, but their essence will go back to the burning hells, and they'll kind of hang out there until they get a chance to pop back over to Sanctuary, unless you destroy. What's the name of the forge?
Oh, it was the Anvil of Annihilation, right?
Yeah. You know, if you destroy the Soulstone on the the Anvil of Annihilation, then supposedly they're gone forever.
You never know,
right?
Weirder things have happened.
All right. Then the appendix, or kind of like the miscellaneous section for the Book of Tyrael, takes up almost half the entire book, and it was really surprising to see the sheer list and amount of the NPCs and other minor characters through the series that appeared there, though some of them kind of seem somewhat at random, such as you had Noric Vizarin being listed, but not Kara Nightshade from The Legacy of Blood, the first Diablo novel. And you also included some other minor NPCs like Pendleskin from Lord of Destruction. Was there a specific motive behind the ones that were included and the ones that weren't? Or was it more or less just you kind of picked pieces and NPCs that were important that you thought you wanted to touch on?
So, during the development process for let me say first, for Book of Cain, when we were working on that, we had a lot of content, and ultimately we had to cut some of it out, just due to space constraints. And we ended up putting a little bit of that in Book of Tyrael, but basically the same thing happened with Book of Tyrael. During the meetings we had, the development meetings, I remember having this huge list of all these different characters that we could put in the back in that persons of interest. section. And, ultimately it just came down to we didn't have room for all of them. We had to kind of go through, whittle them down, cut some of them out. So that's probably the biggest reason why, some characters are in there and some aren't. Another thing, though, is that there were certain characters that I noticed the fans wanted to know a little bit more about, or kind of like fan favorites and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So we wanted to include some of those in there. Like Pindleskin is one example. I know a lot of people like the Pindleskin. So
Everyone knows a Pindle run.
Speaking of characters, and I don't know what kind of answer I'm going to get out of this, but who are Ardleon and Morbid? I don't ever recall coming across them before in any of the other prior lore books.
So I can speak to Morbid. Morbid is one to keep an eye out for. I can't say too much other than he's a really interesting character. There's going to be a story associated with him, and he has very unique abilities and a kind of a character kit that's I think is really awesome. I'm a little bit biased because I'm doing a lot of the writing for that, but definitely something to look out for. Morbid is an awesome character.
Ooh.
And
Yes.
for Ardleon, so one of the cool things about D3 was that, there's all the little side conversations and where they mention a character from the past lore, or even for some of the legendary items, they'd have some flavor text that would mention certain characters. So Ardleon was, I think if I remember correctly, he was mentioned in a conversation you could have with Tyrael, and as just an angel that he had known in the past and had fought alongside.
Okay.
All right, so just bringing them kind of to the forefront and touching on any of the newly created characters in D3.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Of course, one of the big draws for coming up in the Reaper of Souls is the new class, the Crusaders. What exactly has been driving the Crusaders all these years? We know that their mission was to try and purge corruption, from the Zakarum faith, but it seems that most of the order was just kind of sent out into the wilds, beyond Kyrgyzstan, outside of the influence of the church, and without any actual formal structure to their leadership. They were all just kind of acting on their own. What was it that was driving them? What motivations did they have to continue this quest?
I think a big part of it was just that original, and this is all stuff from in here. Let me see. I think his name was Akan, the guy who basically created the order. When he sent them out, I think part of it was probably that he chose the right guys, the right men and women that really believed what he did, that there was this corruption at the heart of the Zakarum faith that needed to be healed. And so having chosen those kind of paragon individuals, he basically made it so that they would carry on that that tradition to all their apprentices and stuff like that. So I think that's a big part, and I think it's just that you can see, we saw it in D2 that there is corruption in the church. Mm-hmm. So seeing that manifest on the world, I think, has really driven the Crusaders to continue that quest to search for a cure for it, basically.
So it's something that they just, this was the original quest given by, my masters, 100 or 200 years ago, and they just continued that on the entire time.
Yeah. And
they're really kind of looking for the Holy Grail that's gonna purge the corruption, and they don't necessarily know what that's gonna be, right? Yeah. It's one of those things like they know they need to find it, and they're gonna scour, all of Sanctuary until they find whatever that thing is, or it might be multiple things, but that's really the goal. And it's with the Crusaders, we're going to keep exploring those concepts, in the fiction.
And that's why they started heading east.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of which, so why I'm throwing this out there. Why is East the most evilest of directions? Everyone seeking evil seems to head that direction.
East,
Is there?
go East.
What did I miss? Did I miss something here?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question.
But
Maybe they're.
well, but then there's the change of pace. The Crusaders are now doing the unthinkable, and they're heading west. So
Yeah.
what's pulling them back to the Western kingdoms, or did they just travel so far east that they ended up going west?
Well, I think part of the reason they went east originally, well, it was a few things. One was there was some legends. I think that Akarat, the guy who had basically created the Zakarum religion, there were some legends that he had last been seen going east, and so maybe they thought in following in his path they would find something important. And another reason was, at the same time the Crusaders were founded, Rachis was bringing his army west. And so I think there was a little bit of, if we go west too, we're going to be kind of stepping on each other's toes. And I think it was just convenient for them to start with the east.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Very good.
Nobody ever goes south.
Yeah.
No.
Forget south or north.
Oh gosh. Very, very awesome. Well, you know what? Just like that, we have eaten up 20 minutes of time. Gentlemen, this has not only been fun, but highly educational. Everybody, if you are listening to this or watching the video and you're on the fence about making the purchase on the Book of Tyrael, I can tell you that the price that you pay for it is half of what it's worth. The cover, the artwork, and just how beautiful the book is. It's absolutely breathtaking. Micky, Matt, I cannot thank you guys enough for taking time out of your schedules to talk to me about this. Yeah, it's just so appreciated, and this was fun. This was fun.
Well, I definitely had a blast, and I appreciate you guys having us on. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you for
Certainly.
joining us.
Yes, you are welcome back anytime. So, also, make sure you guys are visiting MickyNeilson.com as well. Everything about Micky is up there, and it's very impressive. Very cool website. So
Everything about him.
everything. He's going to Kmart tonight. Oh, gosh. But the link for everything else is going to be in the show notes. That is going to do it for us here. So on behalf of BlizzPro and the TwizCast crew, we encourage everyone to game safe, love one another, and please, everyone within the sound of my voice, take care. You've been listening to TwizCast, the official podcast of BlizzPro.com. The audio download for this interview is available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and TwizCast.com, and the video of this is available on BlizzPro.com and the BlizzPro YouTube channel. As always, we thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next week.